Hey, survivors, we are so excited to be here again.
There you go.
Okay. We are here with the Warburtons, and I'll let Josh introduce them. He grew up with Jared, so.
Well, yeah, Jared and I, Jared's father was a fairly influential person in Pleasant Grove. If they've had any aluminum siding, it's a good chance that the Warburton or the Southam family put it up, and for a lot of years it was both, right, Jared?
That's right, yeah.
So Jared and I grew up together, a year apart in schooling, but certainly had some close connections. Our brothers, similar ages, and we were similar in age. And one of my biggest memories of Jared growing up was like this ultra inspirational athlete. This kid would bike up American Fork Canyon and then come down the face of the mountain and do this all in a day. And at that stage for me, that was like a week-long bike ride for me. So Jared was a pioneer in our community from my perspective with competitive mountain biking and endurance athlete. I'll probably deny it now, but I think he's at heart, right, Kristin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So anyways, that's super excited to have Jared and Kristin join us. As always, it's not, we have a commonality that we don't love about our past, I guess, all the times that we've lost a child, each of us, but it's a blessing that we've been able to join paths together, and grateful that the Warburtons are willing to share a part of their heart tonight with us. So Jared and Kristin, if you guys wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from and how you met and some of that, because I think some of your background story is pretty cool. I didn't know any of that until you shared a little bit of that a few weeks back with me.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, Josh, I grew up in Pleasant Grove. Kristin grew up in Payson. We actually had, after high school and things like that, gone on to college and done certain things with our lives. And I was married previously, as well as Kristin was married previously. And both went through some pretty painful divorces and ended up living in the same apartment complex, just one building over. And we were able to meet at church and got to know each other and started dating. And I think once we kind of found out that we had that shared common background of both going through a divorce, that really helped us empathize with each other and become a whole lot closer. And so we started dating and eventually got married. So, at that point in life, I always thought, man, that going through divorce is probably the hardest thing I'm ever going to have to go through in life. That's my trial. That's it. And everything should be smooth sailing from here on out. And that wasn't quite the case, unfortunately, but and we'll share more of that during our story. But just extremely grateful that we were able to find each other, because we've since we've been married, we have 4 beautiful children. We have 3 boys, an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and then we have our daughter Ruby, who is in heaven now, and just lived with us just 15 days on this earth. But definitely grateful to have them all.
Cool.
Anything you want to add to that? Anything that I've left out?
That was good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I know growing up in Utah and stuff, probably there was some toughness about being so young and going through that divorce process at that age, feeling in some ways probably alienated from your peers of similar status and whatever, and feeling like, holy cow, how can I be this young and have already gone through this? Is like what I remember hearing about my friends' parents or something, right? And
yeah,
going through that stage very early. And I think it is unique that that you guys both in that situation then found each other in the same apartment complex. That's pretty cool. And I think that's one of the things that through any time of grief, particularly with death, you then learn to empathize in a way that there's no way that you guys would have been able to empathize with each other the same way that you can now
Right.
without going through that prior to your relationship with each other. So I think that's a cool little parallel. So
Yeah.
great. Well, tell us a little bit about Ruby and what that journey was like. Was it a pregnancy that was anticipated having some difficulties? Was this a known thing for you guys?
I'll let you kind of share more about that, Kristin. The pregnancy started out very smoothly, and with our first child, Ruby was our second child. With our first child, Luke, things went very smoothly with his pregnancy, and things went fine. And Ruby seemed to be going that way until we had her ultrasound. And I'll kind of let you take it from there on
Sure.
what happened next.
So yes, everything was great with her pregnancy, and at 20 weeks, everything even looked great then. She was growing and developing like she should at that point, but they had some concerns with my placenta. And so they wanted me to just come back in and check up on that, make sure that that was going to be okay for delivery. And so at 28 weeks, we went back in to do another ultrasound. And that's when they started to have some concerns about the growth of her brain at that point. And it was just some simple things. They said her ventricles in her brain were dilated more than they should be. And of course, they had reassured us that, by about 32 weeks, they hopefully will go back down and everything's going to be okay. I got my little buddy here. So at 32 weeks, we went back. At 32 weeks, we had went back in for another ultrasound, and unfortunately, things were not looking as good as we had hoped. And so at that point, it got especially tricky because Jared had got a job offer in Las Vegas at that point. And so we were kind of in limbo, realizing that maybe this pregnancy wasn't going to be as smooth as we had hoped. And at that point, they were thinking that she possibly had something called hydrocephalus, or water on the brain, if you've heard of that, that she would possibly need to go through some surgeries after birth. And so we were in limbo deciding whether or not we should move to Vegas and take this awesome job opportunity that we just had when I was 32 weeks pregnant, and not exactly knowing what was going to happen with our Ruby girl. So we decided and acted on faith that we should move down to Vegas. And at the time, I think we were like, yes, we feel good about moving down here. Maybe there are doctors down here that are going to help us in this situation. And we actually ended up meeting with an amazing neurosurgeon that we were like, okay, I think this is why we're here. We are in Vegas because she's going to help Ruby after birth be able to do these surgeries, and we'll be on our way. And so it was kind of a crazy time. We moved to Vegas, had to find all new doctors and new specialists, and he was starting a brand new job, and we had moved completely away from family. We didn't know a single person there. And I got down there, and 30 days to the day, I delivered Ruby. And we were going into her delivery thinking that these problems were going to be able to be resolved. We didn't know the exact outcome and what kind of life she was going to have, but we in no way thought that her situation was going to be terminal. And so we went into her birth thinking that we were going to be down there for a reason and now all's going to be well. And unfortunately, after delivery, we got some heartbreaking news. They took her in for an MRI and came back with the news that no, it's not hydrocephalus. There's not a whole lot that can be done. Her brain had not developed in the areas that it should, and she had quite a few severe brain abnormalities that were not compatible with life, and that her prognosis was that she would not probably live past a year. I think at that point, anyone with that diagnosis hadn't lived past a year, but most of them live with, pass away within 2 weeks to a month.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So pretty devastating news after going through a pretty, dramatic birth. They took me in C-section at 38 weeks. She was not breathing at the time of delivery, and so they had to intubate her and rush her away. And again, no family around. Luckily, we had an amazing church group down there that rallied and supported us and jumped in immediately. But it was a very trying time, I think. I think you start questioning, why did we move down here? Why are we away from family? Why, why why is this all happening now? And I think that was one of the hardest things, is trying to figure out, are we being watched over? Is this the plan for us? Did we make the right decisions? And ultimately, I mean, what it comes down to is, man, we were amazed at the service and the support and love from everyone we knew and everyone we didn't know. The people that started serving us in ways that we never imagined, being new to the area, was unreal. And that's something that I'll never be able to forget, nor be able to repay that kind of situation. But it was an incredible, humbling, devastating time, all wrapped up into one, for sure.
So Ruby was born, taken away on intubation, and then what was you said she lived for 2 weeks? Is that right?
Yes, for 15 days we were able to be with her. She stayed in the NICU the whole time, and we didn't get her official diagnosis until she was probably
3 or 4 days
Yeah.
old. Yeah.
And so we were again waiting to kind of hear what was going to happen. And that part was hard, not knowing. One, we knew something was wrong with her after she was born. We could tell things weren't right. She was just the sweetest little girl, but barely made a peep. I don't think we heard her cry after she was born.
Yeah.
And she was just super small, pretty low muscle tone, that kind of thing. So we knew that we were dealing with more than what we had initially thought. And so then began the meetings with doctors and trying to come up with a plan. Should we try and take her home? Should she go to hospice? And then at that point, it was just trying to figure out, you know, what to do and what was going to happen. We started trying to plan for her to come home with us, but every day there was just more and more setbacks. She couldn't keep up her body temperature. She couldn't sit in a car seat. She continually needed to be back on a cannula and then intubated and then just oxygen. And so there were so many things that led us to the decision that she would not be able to even survive the transfer home. And so then came more meetings of trying to decide. And I think this was our hardest part, is we were getting, you know, a lot of pressure from the doctors to make these decisions, but ultimately you're choosing the day that your daughter passes away. And how do you put that on a parent to pretty much decide the day that you take your daughter off the machines? And that's what we were asked to do. And so we were struggling, as you can imagine, to try and figure out how we're going to do this. What do we do? And so late one night, Jared and I were visiting her because we loved to be there. It was a sacred place for us. Even if we were just sitting by her bedside, not even holding her, there was just something about being there that just was a spiritual experience. And so we were sitting there late one night, and her brain would, you know, our brain tells us to breathe, right? Well, since her brain wasn't developed, one of the problems is that she would just stop breathing, no matter if she had the nasal cannula in or whatever. And so we had some orders to resuscitate her if she stopped breathing, to do everything that they could to try and get her breathing again. And this one particular night we were sitting there and she was just laying there. We weren't even holding her, and she started to code. And so the nurses sometimes just, you know, they're super calm and they get up and they just start trying to situate her, open up her airway and do the things, you know, to get that oxygen up again, and nothing was working. And so then they start bagging her. They pull out the oxygen bag and start bagging her, and usually that works. Well, it didn't. And so she presses the button and starts calling the nurses and the doctors over, and Jared and I kind of had to step back a little bit while they start working on our daughter. And it's kind of in full panic mode, as you can imagine, because one, we're not ready for this to be the end of her life, but yet we're looking at each other and the doctors are looking at us like, what do you want us to do? So they got her back breathing again. But at that point, we looked at each other and we're like, how long are we going to make these nurses and doctors keep doing this? Obviously, she's telling us that she's ready to go. So what is it? Am I telling them to keep doing this because I'm not ready to let her go, even though this is happening more and more frequently? Every time we would come into the hospital, they would say that, you know, this was happening all night. And so at that point, we were finally like, okay, we're not ready to let her go. We're never going to be, but I think she's ready to go. And so that night we finally felt the peace and calm that we needed to be like, okay, do we have this happen again where there's chaos and doctors everywhere? Or do we finally tell her goodbye ourselves in a private room, kind of the way we want to? And so that's how we were able to make the decision do that. And so the next day we were able to wheel Ruby into a private room and take all of her cords off and machines beeping at us and all of that. And we had an amazing photographer come in and take some beautiful pictures of her while she was still alive and breathing, and be able to spend some time with her before her body shut down. And I think we both knew that her spirit left her body before her body actually shut down. We have a strong belief that, we're made up of a spirit and a body. And so we felt her presence leave us. And that was just another confirmation to us that, man, we knew Ruby spirit. That we just knew her, and we knew that she was just full of this calmness and this grace about her. And so yeah, it was definitely a really spiritual, sacred time for us as well, to be able to have her spirit leave and know that, and then also just be able to take care of her body as it decided to leave us as well.
Wow.
That's amazing. You're making me tear up. That would take a lot of courage for sure to be able to, I think every parent in your situation kind of has to come to that point, and it's amazing how much courage that would have had to take. But also at the same time, it sounds like you just felt like at peace with that decision. And
Yeah.
their grief, I'm sure there was like grief to have to make that decision, like kind of you had the grief that you knew she was going to pass away, but then also the grief that you had to make that decision, like you were the one that was in charge of that decision.
I think that's what was the hardest part of the whole thing, is knowing that we had to make the decision on what we do, even though we knew her journey on this life was going to be short. There was no denying that. And we were trying to do everything we could to figure out what kind of life she could have possibly outside the NICU. And then when we realized that wasn't going to be a possibility, the torment that kind of racks your soul as you're trying to decide what's the best thing for her. And I think that night was our answer, that keeping her alive wasn't the best thing for her, even though that's what we wanted. That night kind of proved to us that that wasn't what she wanted, and that wasn't what was in her plan either. And I think Jared and I have kind of talked about this. I was telling him that I was talking to a friend just this past week that, during this crazy time of us moving down to Vegas and trying to find doctors and figure out what to do, and our family decided, hey, we need to pray for Kristin and Jared during this time. And I remember driving on the crazy Las Vegas freeway through the casinos. It was kind of a crazy time, but I distinctly remember this, driving on the freeway and knowing all the prayers that were being sent in our behalf, and physically feeling these prayers, and getting this clear answer in my mind, like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And so I hung on to that for that time. And, after all of this, and we're getting all these answers, like, Ruby's not okay. She's not going to be okay. It's terminal. And I kept thinking, why did I get this impression that everything was going to be okay? And so it took a while for me to kind of process through that. And what it comes down to is everything's going to be okay. yes, Ruby was not okay. It wasn't the outcome that we wanted. Is she okay? Absolutely, she's okay. Are we okay? Yes, we are okay. It's not the okay that I was hoping for. Um, but in the end, is everything okay? Yes. Yes, we're okay. We're making it through. We're doing it. We are we're okay. And there's still joy to be had in this life, and we're finding it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that kind of segues a little bit into the title that you guys kind of come up with there tonight, that is "Come What May and Love It." Nothing that you've just described sounds like anything I want to love.
No.
That sounds horrible. That sounds hard. That sounds excruciating. And it also sounds confusing, you know, from a conviction standpoint. I know that many people have felt what you just described, a feeling of, yes, everything's going to be okay, and we might interpret it one way or another, and then it not turn out the way that we had interpreted it, but still then learning and discovering, what is that okay that I felt, or what is that okay that people talk about? How do they get to that okay stage or whatever? So tell us a little bit about what do you guys, when you say "come what may and love it" with that, tell us a little bit about where that came from and kind of what that means to your family now moving forward.
So so we lost Ruby almost, it'll be 10 years in October. So 10 years ago and even further back, that's when blogs were a big thing. And I was really into record keeping and keeping a blog of our family's life and day-to-day events. And before we even had Ruby, I changed the name to "Come What May and Love It," because I loved the title of that and what that means. And it doesn't mean that everything that comes your way you have to love. But I had no idea that that was going to kind of carry us through that time. In fact, my blog became quite the outlet for me for my grief, and I kept a pretty good record of everything that we were going through during that time and the years to come after that. And I think it was quite the emotional outlet that I needed in my journey of healing. But going back to your question of "come what may and love it," we don't get to pick our trials in life most times, unless we bring them on ourselves. But like Jared said, you know, we thought, okay, we've been through divorce. We've made it through the other side. We've found each other. We're going to move forward. And during our divorces, I felt like we had also kind of gone through a grief cycle as well, grieving the loss of a spouse in a different way, not to death, but still grieving the loss of a spouse, grieving the loss of a marriage, grieving the loss of what could have been, grieving the loss of the possibility of having kids and a family, not knowing what the future holds. And so we've kind of seen that grief cycle, and we thought, okay, we've come out of divorce, we're good, but you don't get to pick your trials. And unfortunately, that has not been the end of our trials, nor will it be. Unfortunately, we're anticipating that more things are going to come our way. And so I think that's kind of what "come what may" encompasses, is like, things are going to come your way and you don't have control over it, but you do have control over how you move forward. I think, especially with the loss of a child or the loss of someone close to you, it's hard to be like, I'm moving on, you know, I'm moving on. There's not really moving on, but there's moving forward. And I think that's kind of what "come what may" and love it means is that no matter what comes our way, we can find some joy out of life. We can find some things that we can still love about life and the blessings that have come. Yes, this trial with losing Ruby was so hard. But wow, the blessings that we've seen from it, the friendships we've made, the perspective that we have, the empathy that we've gained. I'm not so sure we could have that any other way.
Yeah. What's really helped me is just keeping an eternal perspective on things. We believe that the reason why we came to this earth was to be tested and to be tried. And the trials are just a part of life. That's the way it is. And so when we're faced with a trial, we can ask, why me? Or we can ask, why not me? Why am I so special that I shouldn't have to go through any sort of a trial? And thinking about that helped me a lot during the process of losing Ruby. Thinking, you know what? This isn't ideal. This is not what I would have planned for myself. This is hard, but I still have hope. I still have many good things in my life. I've got a lot of things to be grateful for in spite of this hard trial. And to kind of refocus back on blessings, back on the things that I do have, the good things that are still a part of my life, I think it really helped me get through that time. Why not me? Why, we all have trials to go through. And it could always be far worse than what we have. And I think keeping that in mind, keeping that perspective that, hey, I've got this, but at least I don't have this, and this to go along with it. I still have many things to be grateful for. There's still so many blessings in my life. You can find joy even in the midst of tragedy. You can see the blessings. When I think back on that time of moving to Vegas, we had been there a month before we had Ruby. That wasn't a whole lot of time to really get to know people, but I feel like our church family there just rallied around us and helped us through that time. There was a couple in particular that we became very good friends with right from the start, and they had gone through a very similar experience just the year before, where they had lost a child as well. And it was no coincidence that they were placed in our path at that point in time. We just became great friends. They helped us through that time. We helped them with their trials as well. And when I think back on that time, it's hard for me not to get emotional. And it's not just getting emotional about the loss of Ruby. It's getting emotional about all of the all the help, all the love. My heart just swells with gratitude for all the people that helped us out during that time, all the people who served us and helped us. And that just makes me realize how important it is to have community. We're all in this together, we're here to help each other out. And it definitely made me want to reach further outside of myself when I have the opportunity to help others who are going through similar things. It also taught me sometimes we're so scared to know how to best reach out to people when they go through tragedy. We just don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And going through things with Ruby taught me it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you do. Just as long as you're trying to do something, that's all that counts. And that's all that matters, people recognize that. They're grateful for it. They're appreciative of it. I know we were. I didn't care that people had the perfect words to say to me. I just cared that they were expressing their love for me. And that's really what it comes down to.
I love what you said about gratitude, because I before Lily passed away, I broke my ankle, and instead of at night, crying, why can't I exercise anymore, or why can't I do it? I was crying at night because of all of the love that was given to us. And so that trial really taught me the power of gratitude. And I say gratitude's like magic. And then when Lily passed away, it was the same. Every time we think about it, our heart just swells, because the amount of love and care and everything that everyone did for us, it's amazing what gratitude can do. And to be able to have joy in sorrow, joy in pain, you think about that, and that's how can that be? But it can be, because of the amount of love and care that people give you. And it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend tell me once that joy and pain can coexist. And that's kind of a new concept for me. And I was like, that's exactly what's happening. Joy and pain are coexisting in me right now. This is something that's pretty devastating to go through. But yeah, I can still find happy moments in every day too. I had a little 2-year-old boy at the time that still needed me. And I wanted the world to just stand still for a minute so that I could just grieve. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute to mourn. And, and I remember looking outside and just everyone going about their day. And I kept thinking, don't you know? Don't you know what I'm going through right now? Can't everyone just stop? Can't you just stop for just a minute and let me just breathe? And can't my 2-year-old just stop, so I can process this? But yeah, life goes on.
Yeah.
And so I needed to figure out how to let pain and happiness coexist in me, and be able to still grieve and process what's going on. But then also, there were still happy moments to celebrate. And then you learn, you continually learn how to have those coexist. And I think it is a learning process, but it can happen. And I think that's what having gratitude and serving others. I know we had so many people reach out to us, like we said, that we were like, we got to give back. We got to figure out, how to a way to honor Ruby, since so much was done for us during this time. How can we give back? How can we repay all that was done to us during this difficult time? And I think that was one way that we were able to really progress in our healing, is serving and gratitude. But we've also talked that everyone grieves differently. Jared and I grieve differently. Men and women grieve differently. And I think that's what another thing everyone needs to realize too. These friends that we became really close to, that we've talked about, they grieve differently. She grieves very differently than me. I needed to talk about it. I needed to say her name. I needed to hang up pictures. I needed to, come up with service projects and be involved in community groups and support groups. And she just needed time by herself. And she still does every year. She's very quiet, and she doesn't want much effort put into it, except for just celebrating those milestones with family. And that's it. And there's no one way to do it. But I think the best thing is to find what works for you, whether that be support groups in the community out there, because it's a big community. There's a lot of us, unfortunately. Or if it's just that one friend that you can talk through things with, or if it's a journal or whatever it is, recognizing that everyone grieves differently. Especially, I think the reason I think he gets emotional when talking about it is that he kind of only, I think.
Well, it was explained really well by this friend of ours. When we were going through things, he said, now men and women grieve very differently. Just so you know, men, we like to package our grief up and put it up on the shelf. And every now and then we'll go and we'll open that up and we'll revisit it. Whereas women, it's just with them all the time.
Have it on our shoulders all the time.
And so maybe that's why I do get emotional when I talk about it, because it's going and taking that off the shelf again and opening it back up and feeling that the flood of memories and feelings that go along with it.
Sure.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking that Ruby must be extremely proud of just thinking and listening to both of you 10 years later. I know that if I was your parent and I could look down and say, gosh, if my children ever had trials in their life, if they could respond like you guys just did tonight, wow, that would be a joy for a parent in thinking about how to respond and how to work through. And I agree with, we've had many people say what you said tonight. You can't move on, but you can move forward, and you can find that joy even when the pain exists. So wow, what a service that you guys have been to us tonight. Thank you so much for sharing that journey and with us. Are there any other things that you would like to say to other families or other people that may walk a similar path before we conclude tonight?
Just that things are hard when you go through them. They're so hard, and sometimes you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you don't see things ever getting better. But they do. Grief is a tricky thing. It's a complicated thing, and when you're in the midst of it, sometimes it can be hard to be hopeful. It can be hard to feel like you're ever going to feel good again, or things are ever going to get better. But I guess if we can attest to anything, it's that life can still be good, even with grief. I mean, we're always going to have that grief that lingers on. I mean, we'll continue to grieve and mourn the loss of Ruby until we get to be with her again. But that doesn't mean that life is terrible. It just means that we loved someone a lot, who we miss a lot. But life, there's still so much to be grateful for. There's so much to be happy about. There's a lot of joy left to be found in life. And yes, I would just say, don't forget about that. Don't think that can't happen, because it will happen. You'll find joy again. Anything else you'd like to add?
Just as you were talking, I was just thinking about this past week. I have a friend who's experiencing a miscarriage right now, and it's been very difficult for her. And so when we were talking, and she was just like, I just don't know why I'm just so upset. It wasn't that far along, and I remembered this quote that someone said. I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but it goes something like, grief is just another form of love. And so it's just, if you're grieving, it's just showing that you love someone, and to take grief out of life is to take love out of life. And so I think recognizing that grief's okay, and that it's totally a normal thing. It just means that we loved, and that we still love, and that we're going to continue to love. And I mean, thinking that it's been a decade since we've experienced this is crazy to think about. But every year that we hit those milestones, I just think, oh, we made it another year. It's just 1 year closer to seeing her. We're getting there, and we're doing it, and we're proof that we can do it, and that we're still living life. And yet we're still able to have her as part of our family, as we talk about her and remember her every year, that we're that much closer to being with her.
It's amazing. What a treat, you guys. It's been amazing to hear your story, and to just feel, I could just feel the love you have for Ruby, and it lives on through you guys. I can just feel it. And I'm just so grateful that you could join us tonight and share your hearts, because it's truly touched mine.
Yep. I've learned some good things here tonight too. I particularly like the, and I haven't really conceptualized it in this way until tonight, just hearing you, but the times that I had earlier on in my life that were dark, and that I remember thinking, just like Jared was saying, this is hard. I'm having a hard time finding hope. I don't see light at the end of this tunnel. But then just going through it, and now I can see, wow, when we lost our daughter Lily, I had had a number of these dark to light, dark to light. And that really has been one of the most sustaining powers for me, is to conceptualize and realize that we can have extreme darkness, but the light does and can always come. We have to usually push forward and move forward. There's usually requires some action on our part. Kristin, I, like you, I wanted to ring bells and send off sirens. Like, doesn't everybody know that I just lost my daughter? Why should I have to go to work for the rest of this year? Why should I, can't, and there's this, it's a desperate kind of, probably a cry from all of us, but to know that moving forward brings that light is awesome. So thank you guys so much. Thoroughly enjoyed having you.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to just remind all of the people that may watch or view this that this month's Cameron Cares, we're sponsoring and partnering with Cameron Cares Foundation. So we encourage you to take a minute to go on Survivors and see what that's about. Dustin and Chrissy have done an awesome job making a little video and telling us what Cameron Cares is about. And so we certainly invite you to join with us. And this week is Cameron's birthday on the 14th. So if any way that you can, find some watermelon and bubbles. If anybody wants to eat watermelon and blow bubbles on the 14th this week, would be in honor of our sweet little Cameron. So thank you so much. Warburton, thanks so much for joining us here with Survivors. Appreciate it a lot. You guys have brought a lot of value here tonight.
Thank you. Glad we could do it.